Hello, I want to talk about a particular context. We've got a huge appetite for agility, dealing with thousands of people, maybe even tens of thousands of people. And there's a tendency to call every collaborative effort a scrum. So short-term problem solving that maybe should be done with a Kaizen event or something, we actually call it a scrum. And a low appetite for risk as well. Assume that there's some kind of decision tree in the organization where they know when it's right to use original lean, for example, when it's right to use Scrum, Kanban, Scrum and Kanban, and so on. So I'm going to draw some circles and just give you some kind of sense of how I see the situation in this particular context. So I have a group of people who essentially want to fake it. They don't really want any change. Quite happy to have a sprint review. It's a Scrum event. Have a sprint review. Maybe even fake the activity leading up to that to make it look like we're actually doing Scrum all week, but just kind of literally putting together the movie set at the end of the week to make it look all wonderful. So essentially it looks like a duck, quacks like a duck. It's not actually a duck. So the first thing I do is I call those out and put across true, because I do not support faking. And I ask all the coaches with me not to support faking, because it doesn't really lead to good outcomes. I rather actually a team went to what we call respecting no. So if someone doesn't want to be doing this agility, and either I've given them some training or I discovered through coaching that actually some of these people don't actually want to be in any team, fake Scrum or otherwise. I'd rather they were back in the traditional way of working, and out of respect for them and respect for the people who actually want to go into change, I think it's better even to treat people like that as dependencies, and I think it's more respectful to people all around. I'd hardly call this a maturity framework, but I would use it to kind of make sense of what's going on. And the next level up, I would say, would be what I call Trojan horse. And so in this particular case, what you're doing is you're putting in an approach that helps the organization to deliver faster. You maybe have some kind of plumbing problem with your delivery, and at least you're using some approach to help you to make progress. So examples would include Scrum at Scale, Scale Agile Framework, both pretty much bowing to the hierarchy that you have at the moment, and but very much going in as a Trojan horse and trying to infect the organization positively with agility. I would say also Spotify, copy, paste and adapt would be in here. ING, copy, paste and adapt, and lower levels of maturity of Lean Kanban will be here as well. Lean Kanban can of course go through various levels of maturity. So here it's very much about delivering faster. If you're in this world and there is an appetite to get away from faking, the typical strategy would be to use Kanban to get out of that, or to apply one of the frameworks over here, like say for example to at least try to put some order and try to get away from the traditional way of working, and at least make steps towards that. The teams over here are doing some level of experimentation. I've heard of experimentation kind of ING, for example, so maybe using techniques like Toyota Kata, for example, where they are trying to nudge forward. And that leads on to an important point actually, because before you decide to do any of this, you need to understand why you're going for agility in the first place. So it's usually good to have some kind of direction of travel. And so if this is time, and this is like a time horizon, and let's say this is where you want to be, you got some lovely big hairy audacious goal, looks like SpongeBob SquarePants, but it's supposed to be a vision or an evolving vision really, more like a direction of travel. And then there might be lots of smaller iterative steps to kind of getting to that. And sometimes we make some improvements, and sometimes actually things actually get worse. That's the nature of experimentation. It's a very bad start there, but the general idea is that over time you're hoping to get to this place, and so you need to decide what your optimizing goal is. And in this particular case, you're kind of limited to delivering faster with the Trojan horse. You might at a later point decide that you want to do a little bit more. So instead of just delivering faster, you actually want to deliver better value faster. So deliver better value faster. So over here we are delivering faster. Over here we're trying to really understand what the customer wants. There's kind of more customer centricity. So delivering better value faster. Over here we still had a kind of a project focus, I would say. Maybe even a service focus. But over here much more of a product focus. So more about long-term stable teams. Still a tolerance of projects. And a typical pattern in here would be something like Nexus. Professional Scrum and Kanban, or higher level of maturity of Lean Kanban. In this world, you might have said that you want to deliver better value faster, you want to be closer to the customer, you definitely want to be more responsive, but you're really just fixing problems. You don't really have a huge appetite to flip the system and move from a functional organization to a cross-functional organization. So in this world, in my experience, what tends to happen is while we have the change energy, while we have coaches on the ground, and while we haven't declared success in terms of our journey towards our direction of travel, this tends to recede back into the older ways of working. So if you really want to sustain agility, you actually need to take the next step. And that is a kind of a deeper level of agility where you actually flip. And so instead of up here where you have typical hierarchy, I'm very bad at drawing, but excuse my back while I'm showing this to you, but you get the idea. Sometimes it's like 10 layers of hierarchy and so on. And what tends to happen, even here, we tend to get leaders at a higher level pushing down new initiatives. New initiatives are being pushed down into the organization. Push being the key word, right? So we need to improve revenue, or we need to lower costs, which actually their outcomes actually maybe as a result of delivering faster. But what's happening is in some of these organizations, particularly in this context, the management layer is the layer that's actually running the company. So the senior leaders are driving new change in, and that's creating a lot of stress at this level. And we also get a situation where we get number one priorities. And everything's number one. Because actually if I was the CEO and I went to my different reports, for those reports, certain initiatives would be number one. However, when you get down to the lower levels, what happens is you get competition for the same people, basically, and other types of resource. And you end up with a situation where everything is number one. So it's not entirely comfortable. Although I would hope in this situation that we're starting to have a single backlog, but I've seen in some cases where this actually hasn't happened at this level. And so there's some order to what's most important. The key thing is that this is likely to recede unless you actually flip the system. And by flipping the system, we're effectively turning the organization upside down. And so what you have is you have cross-functional teams. You have cross-functional teams up here as well, but the teams here are truly self-managing. Up here, the teams were ultimately, team members were ultimately owned by the functions, and the functions have this magnetic pull, pulling people back. to their own functions. And this was a very interesting comment in the podcast by Jeff Sutherland and Darryl Rigby in June of 2018, where they noticed that in Fidelity Investments in particular, they actually did this 5 times already, they're doing it for the 6th time. And Jeff asked, you know how to do, you know how to implement Scrum. So why are you doing this for the 6th time? Why didn't you just leave it there the 5th time? And the answer was the functional organization pulled people back. So that's why it's really crucial that you need to flip. And this is tricky because you can really only do this with a few people at a time. So we tend to call this deep and narrow. You go with maybe 50 people at a time, you change the way people are motivated. Well, ultimately you're motivating the entire system. Ultimately it'll be profit sharing as opposed to individual bonuses. You measure people on the number of skills they have, materially different skills they have, how many skills they can coach other people on. Teams hire their managers, if there are managers. Teams hire their scrum masters, product owners, still very much in charge of the money. But down here in this world, you're basically changing the system from a hierarchy to much more of a kind of a networked organization where you've got lots of teams, all kind of connecting to each other in a very much like Team of Teams format that you would have seen in that Team of Teams book by General McChrystal. So much more about people talking to each other, getting very far away from coordinating structures. Back here in Deliver Faster, Trojan Horse, that we still had coordinating structures. We even had Scrum Masters coordinating, which I'm very uncomfortable with. This is why I tend to work more on this side. Teams who want to use Nexus with Scrum, Kanban, Lean Startup, even Lean UX. It's a very malleable pattern. You can adapt it for that. And then I tend to use large-scale Scrum down here, or Nexus with Scrum Studio, which also has a way of flipping the system, although less seems to be a more mature way of dealing with that. And what you do then is you either grow this world, this is called like a parallel universe, or you just have lots of extra satellites. So you flip 50 people here, then maybe you have another 50, another 50, another 50, and slowly over time, you're getting more and more goodness, more flipped cross-functional teams right across your organization. You don't have to use parallel universe. Another way would be to actually start up here with large-scale Scrum even, where you're not delivering a truly potentially shippable increment every single sprint. What you're doing is you're expanding your definition of done, the level of doneness in the Scrum team, to eventually have a situation where you're shipping. But this is the more simpler format that I tend to talk to people about. So what are the enablers to make this happen? So we've already talked about the direction of travel. We also need to be careful about limiting growth. So there's a common thinking mistake that actually what we can do is, we can just keep on improving our performance and everything's going to be wonderful. We tend to have limits to growth. And so what tends to happen actually is, rather than this super world, maybe you'll be doing really, really well to actually go here, but typically what can happen is we can actually get overloaded and actually almost go the other way. So this is a key insight. Actually, it's one of the archetypes from the Fifth Discipline field book. Highly recommend that you look at that. And so here in this world, we expect leaders to act as coaches, another thing we expect to do, which kind of goes along with this, is we expect you to try and limit the demands going through the system, because the system has limited capability. So if you have lots of PBIs that you want to put through the system, lots of features, lots of dramas, epics, whatever you want to call them, and you want to put them through this limited system, if the system becomes very overburdened, you could have a situation where the pipe is actually getting blocked, and we end up with this weird arithmetic situation where 2 plus 2 isn't equal 4. It might actually be equal to 1, or it might even be equal to minus 1. Why did I say that? That seems a strange thing to say. You learned maths in primary school. And so what I'm talking about here is the concept of failure demand. John Seddon talks a lot about this, where we have these deadlines. We go for the deadlines regardless. We don't, because we're not listening, we're not using our ears, we're actually blaming people instead of actually listening, how can I help, and all that kind of stuff. You can get into a situation here where if you don't limit the demand coming into the system becomes completely overburdened, and you get people kind of sticking to original commitments, delivering to a date, but the quality has actually gone down under the hood. And so actually what can happen is, if you're a bank, for example, the calls into the call centres in terms of reporting problems, they could go way up. So that's something we need to be very, very careful about. We also need to have multi-learning. So if we have a situation where we've got individuals in our team with different skills, we need to be very focused on multi-learning. This is where the deep and narrow from large-scale Scrum in particular and more advanced version of Nexus come into play. What we'd actually expect is that teams would really prioritize multi-learning. This is one of the key findings from the new product development game, HBR paper in 1986. So you'd be kind of expecting that if I've got the red skill, that maybe I can pick up some of the blue skill, and equally over here. And maybe if I've got blue skill, maybe I can pick up some red skill, and so on and so forth. And the idea is that you might be an expert at everything, but you can pick up some of the more simple items. So if there's a product backlog here of, say, red item, blue item, green item, and I happen to have a blue skill, but the blue skill is like the third item on the list. If you really want to have a flexible organization where you're delivering the right value to the customer, you really want to have team members who can actually pull the red item regardless, can get started on it, and if they need help, they can ask for help from the red expert. So multi-learning is key. Another thing that's absolutely crucial as well is budgeting. So the whole notion of annual budgeting needs to get blown away, actually. It's an impediment to agility. So instead of having this like big bag of money, lots of dollars and so on, what we try to do is we try to have, I guess, product owners who have power basically, and they can authorize spend, smaller amounts of spend over quarters or shorter periods, definitely not as long as a year, and that allows them to focus. Are we going to actually do some blue work? Or are we going to do some red work or black work or whatever? So giving us lots more flexibility. So implementing BI budgeting from BR to Bugness would be a big way of actually dealing with that. What's also going to be crucial is that we have stories to tell. So as we're going through this, as we're moving away from faking, as we're allowing people to work the old way, as we take people through who really want to work in this new way, and maybe you could even have a situation where some people in your organization are just delivering faster because that's all they're ready for right now. Some are delivering better value faster, and you've got some smaller pockets again who actually really have the deep appetite to go even further. So hopefully you get more and more of these flipped over time. You get to a situation where this flipped organization is getting bigger and bigger, and or these satellites of goodness get bigger and bigger, and you get to a situation where these top two bubbles here deliver faster or just deliver better value faster. The two of them, we call that broad and shallow. You could do that over thousands of people instantly, pretty much, with lots of coaching support. But down here, this takes months and months for a small group of people. So I put it to you that you should not be just focusing on delivering faster, delivering better value faster, because the magnetism of this hierarchical organization will just retract all the benefits that you've had to date. You need to step forward in this way. Now, for those of you out there who aren't really into frameworks, I do understand that. I came across that in 2012 when I was in a really big company, over 100,000 employees, and I put out some guidance on how people should implement Scrum at the time. I wasn't as up to speed in Kanban at the time. I just started dabbling with it at that stage. But what I noticed was that when we put out the guidance, that 2/3 of people actually needed rules. So we even had a situation where in 2015 I had some people who were delivering faster, 2 groups in the same building. Some of them could work with guidance, but some of them actually needed checklists, believe it or not, because they were so task oriented. There's dangers associated with that, so you need to be careful with that one. The point is that you've got different levels of appetite depending on where you are, and you need to think about, the people that you're dealing with, how much appetite do they really have, how far are they really willing to go, what's their real appetite. So they say they want agility, but what kind of appetite do they really, really need? So you need to give lots of flexibility to your teams to help them to move further, and you need to be telling stories about the benefits of optimizing flow. We've proved in professions from a Kanban and with Lean Kanban that when you reduce the number of initiatives coming into the system, you don't need to be disappointed, because you'll actually get more stuff going through, because everything goes through much quicker, the cycle times are much shorter. If you have leaders acting as coaches, even using Terra, using professional coaching skills, they're asking the right questions related to the direction of travel. It means we're all kind of going in the same direction. We've got multi-learning teams. It means that we've got flexible teams that can move to whatever the latest best idea is for the customer. And if we have more flexible budgeting, that supports our multi-learning teams to be able to flex in that particular direction. And overall, it means that teams are actually using the type of agility that suits their limited context. So in this larger context, thousands of people, but what I notice is that we tend to have subcultures within that. We tend to, within divisions, within locations even. So you might take a different strategy even with different products, even within the same building. So we need to be telling stories, and the approach that I like to do to support that would be viral change from Leandro Herrero. What I love about viral change is it's a pull system. It's about how do we generate it almost like a contagion, a positive contagion of goodness, not heroic stories for people like us, normal people who just trying our best, and showing stories of how they've made progress of delivering faster, delivering better value, or even flipping completely. And for those of you who aren't into frameworks, like that time when I was in that company in 2012, and I discovered actually 2/3 of people need rules, but that meant the other third didn't need rules. We could have kind of gone the John Seddon route. We could have actually gone back to the Agile Manifesto. We could even make up our own patterns, our own frameworks. So we don't even have to have frameworks. We could work based on principles and just talk to the customer and find out what they want. And in this world, you don't even have product backlogs because product backlogs they're just more queues. And actually, we know from lots of different reports that a lot of the functionality that we build isn't even used. So this is much more about what you really, really want and really trying to relate to the customer. I think all of these patterns could do with some improvement in terms of what Clayton Christensen calls jobs to be done. So often we ask the customer what they want, but quite frankly, they don't know what they want. And I think maybe that could be applied here down in John Seddon's area, even XP. Could be applied in any of these areas. The downside of maybe delivering better value faster and deep in our areas, they're both product focused as opposed to customer jobs to be done focused. But I think we could just put a little twist in our thinking, and we should be able to deal with that. So if the top of this here is broad and shallow, and this is deep and narrow, I call the superset of this broad and deep. So it is possible to achieve agility very deeply in lots of pockets and build up more goodness over time, and have a broader pattern or set of patterns to capture the appetite of the thousands of people. Because the worry is that if you just focus on a small number of people go really, really deep, that's great. However, you could get into entropy with the other the thousands of people who are here. You could end up in a situation where this fake it circle is actually getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and it's like Japanese knotweed trying to get rid of that. It's almost impossible once it takes foot. So we need to try to neutralize that as quickly as possible. So I would encourage you to use language like our team's faking it. And we need to be very transparent, very open. When teams are faking it, we need to course correct very, very quickly. And that is broad and deep agility. Thank you.